Good afternoon, and welcome to our Division III post-convention webinar. My name is Bill Regan, Managing Director with Division III, and I'm joined by my colleague, Luis McCleary, Vice President for Division III. We'd like to, before we begin, just a few house cleaning items. If you have a question, please encourage you to use the Q&A function. The PowerPoint is already available online, and the recording of this particular presentation will be available by the end of the week on .org. With that, let us move to our next slide. Today's agenda, what we'll do is give a quick overview of the convention legislation, the proposals that were considered by the membership, talk about one of the proposals that actually referred back to the membership committee, talk about a couple key non-controversial legislative proposals, talk about changes to the federal playing rules, give you an update for championships, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Luis, who will cover the remaining of the agenda. A lot of these are about live streaming our Coaches Connect and things that will be coming in the near future. So with that, Katie, why don't we go ahead and move on? For our convention updates, if you can turn to the next slide, what we had is a slate of legislative proposals. There were 6. In addition, we had one proposal that was pulled from the blue pages. This was the emergency legislation, which was adopted by our President's Council in the summer. What that proposal does is it changes the year in residence. It removes the year in residence and says a student athlete who's not otherwise academically eligible upon transfer can regain their eligibility after serving one term. The membership asked that that be removed from the blue pages for separate consideration. That proposal was, after it was pulled, was in fact ratified, and you can see the vote for that particular proposal. The other proposals that were all adopted by the membership was a change in the composition of our Student Athlete Advisory Committee. That change allows now every multi-sport conference to have a representative, a primary representative, to serve on SAC. We are currently accepting nominations for that SAC position, and those nominations will close on March 14th. Hope is to have all of those individuals selected and to be in attendance for our July SAC meeting. Proposal 2025-2 would change the size requirement for a multi-sport conference, moving it from 7 to 6, which would align with our AQ. We've also made changes to our legislative process to provide for more opportunities for membership feedback and provide more opportunities to amend our legislation. Proposal 2025-4 added an element to our federal ed rules process. What that does is it allows our management council to be able to exempt Division III from a common playing rule that was adopted by prop but is not yet effective. That review can be initiated either through the management council or through 2-member conferences or 20-member institutions asking the management council to review a playing rule. It's important to note that you can't go back and look at playing rules that are already occurring or already effective. It's only for those that have been adopted by prop and have not yet become effective. 2022-25-5 provides a waiver for reclassifying institutions. So if a reclassifying institution meets certain requirements that are currently in place, the timeline for that particular reclassifying process can be waived to go from a 3-year process to a 2-year process. And the final proposal is 2025-6, which is to create a national collegiate championship for women's wrestling. Katie, if there are no questions, we'll move on. There was another proposal that was initially on the docket for consideration for the membership. However, our President's Council referred that particular proposal back to our Management Council. That proposal would have created an exception for a student athlete that graduated from a Division III institution to continue to participate if they're enrolled in a non-member institution that was accredited and had an academic relationship with our Division III institution. President's Council thought, great idea. However, it felt it needed further vetting. They asked the Management Council take a look at that and figure out what to do with it. Our Management Council looked at that in January and referred it back to the membership committee to ask for them to continue to look at that and offer some potential recommendations to move forward. Anticipating that our Management Council will look at those recommendations at its spring meeting, so there'll be ample time to notify the membership about what is happening moving forward, in particular, so all of you can be in a place to potentially act on any of those recommendations for the upcoming academic year. Katie, if you could move ahead. There were several non-controversial legislative proposals that were adopted in final form. Non-controversial legislation is really a two-step process. First, the council generally consider it conceptually. Do they like the concept? Does it make sense? If they approve it in concept, it goes back and the legislation is actually drafted and it comes back to them to be reviewed in its final legislative format. Once it's in its final legislative format, if approved by the Management Council or President's Council, it becomes effective. A couple things I want to highlight is just the first one, the Committee on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. That proposal will become effective September of 2025. And effective, what it does is it consolidates our Committee on Women's Athletics and our Minority Opportunities MOIC to combine the duties of those into one overarching committee. I'll then drop down to our fourth one, and what that requires the term on all of our committees to be 4-year terms, which would change terms right now for our presidents and chancellors, which have been 2-year terms, to make those all 4-year terms that are consistent now for all members on all of our committees. And the last one is to provide greater flexibility for the endocrinologists on our CSMAS committee. What it really does is says, hey, that individual either has to be on staff at a member institution or it has to be from the general public. The committee was finding it difficult to find a qualified endocrinologist and felt that they had to provide more flexibility to get the right individual on the committee to help inform its decisions. Kate, if you can move forward. Federated playing rules. The Management Council in October reviewed an assessment or an audit of the federated playing rules process that it had adopted the prior academic year. Based on that review, it did implement 3 changes. It asked that the staff develop a policy and procedures document. It's anticipated the council will adopt that at its February meeting. Also asked that there be a standard orientation for any committee member, Division III committee member that is involved in the playing rules process in a given academic year. So that would be the Division III members of the actual playing rules committee as well as the Division III sport committee members. Additionally, it created a subcommittee of the Management Council that can continue to provide greater, to amplify the voice for Division III within that process. What the subcommittee of the Management Council do is it will work with those bodies that are reviewing playing rules to be offered additional perspective. Itself cannot actually adopt the rule or change a particular rule. The hope is that they continue to provide additional insight to those governing bodies that are responsible for adopting playing rules. It's important to note that there are several rules that are currently, sports that are currently in a playing rules year. That's football, wrestling, men's and women's basketball, women's lacrosse, softball, and swimming and diving. Just to note that football just sent out a survey about playing rules, and just to encourage you to be able to complete those because the surveys are so important. We have such a broad membership. And what they do is really provide the opportunity for our Division III members to understand where does the Division III membership fall on potential rule changes. Katie, if you can go to the next slide. Championships update. A couple things to make you aware of. Our President's Council approved funding for our women's basketball to participate in a joint championship for the 2008 Women's Basketball Championship. That particular championship will be in Indianapolis. Additionally, the Championships Committee also acted not to support a request from our men's and women's soccer committees to extend the championship season. Really noted a couple reasons. One, noted the additional burden that would play on institutional staff and institutional facilities, as well as acknowledging the temperatures and what that meant for student athletes, especially up in the northern states, to continue when they continue to participate in the championships and the difficulty of trying to accommodate those concerns with weather. When Management Council took a look at this potential issue, they also asked that the Championships Committee take a more comprehensive review of the championship date formula and how the overlap of playing seasons impacts our current championship dates. So our Championships Committee has started that review, started in a meeting they just had earlier this week, and we'll continue that review through the spring. The hope is really to say, okay, How did the playing seasons impact championship date formulas, and how could that information be helpful when looking at any future requests to change the dates of our championships? So right now we've put on pause any real changes to our championship date formulas, except if they're not substantially changing any of the dates until that review is concluded. With that, Katie, I will pause to see if there are any questions.
There are not any questions yet, Bill.
Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Louise.
Thank you, Bill. Before we get started, let me give my public service announcement. We had a glitch with our learning management system. And so I think almost every single person in Division III received an email that you need to complete the committee training video. You do not. And we apologize for any confusion. And for fun, at the end of this webinar, if you want to put in a guess of how many emails I have received in the last 45 minutes, maybe we'll promise some D3 swag to the person that hits it spot on. So you can put that right in the Q&A. All right, so on to the updates, live streaming. I think all of you know that last year the Championships Committee made a recommendation to the councils that if you are hosting a team championship, you need to live stream. And there is a 1 camera minimum for that live stream. And what we're providing to all of our hosts is $1,000 to help offset announcing and production costs. So we just got through the fall. As you can see on the slide, we had over 200 championships were live streamed. What's really important is that was done for free. And what we also thought was really important, the Championships Committee really pushed this, is to say, we don't want fans and family and just the average spectator to have to go to all the different institutional websites. Let's make sure that they can go to one spot to get all of those links. And so we set up a partnership with Huddle. They worked with NCAA.com. So those 210 live stream links were all in one location on .com. They went there. It was a huge success for the fall. In terms of minutes viewed, it was over 11 million. That's compared to over 2 million last year. And then you can also see in the screen, men's soccer had the most unique views. But also what we want to note is that if you've heard President Baker speak, he has talked about the fan database. It has just over 13 million names and email addresses in that fan database. What we have been doing is working with him to say, we would like to take one championship per season and promote it through the fan database, because what we want to show is there value in promoting our championships through the fan database? Again, you can see we did that with field hockey, and there was huge value in that. Our viewership increased by over 150%. So we will find one winter championship, one spring championship, with the idea of, as we move into 25, 26 and beyond, how do we get all of our championships being promoted through the fan database? The last bullet point, Bill mentioned it, the Championships Committee just met yesterday. ESPN Plus, which live streamed the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the championship for women's volleyball, as well as every round of our football championship, asked, especially for football, is there a way we could increase that 1 camera minimum to really increase the production value of those live streams that are being seen by all of their subscribers, 25 million plus. And so we sent out a survey. We got feedback from institutions that sponsor football. What that survey feedback said is most of those institutions could go to 2 cameras for next year. And so the Championships Committee approved that next year for football, if you're hosting, it will be a 2 camera minimum. What the Championships Committee, as well as the football committee, said is, but could we also increase that host stipend? Instead of $1,000, could it be $2,000? And that's something that strategic planning and finance will review and act on during their March meeting. But for now, you can start to plan. If you anticipate hosting a football championship playoff, any round, it's going to be a 2 camera minimum for next year. What we are also looking at in Division III, and we've been having this conversation really since the summer, we heard from the membership to say, how do we improve education and communication with all of our head coaches? And so we've been exploring this idea of a Coaches Connect program. If you have friends or colleagues or former colleagues who are working in Division II, they have had a similar program for the last decade. And so what we have done is created a proposal. We have shared it with the Division III championship managers. We've shared it with the championships committee. Management Council looked at it in January, and all of those different groups gave an initial endorsement of this program. What we have been doing the past couple of weeks is we have sent out a survey to our commissioners as well as the NADIA executive group to say, we want your feedback on it. Does this make sense for Division III to establish a Coaches Connect program that would help with education and information sharing with our head coaches? The idea behind it, let me take the sport of volleyball. So every conference, if they sponsored volleyball, would have one coach that would participate in approximately 4 video conferences a year. And they would be on that video conference with the volleyball championships manager, a representative of the championships committee, a liaison to the academic and membership affairs staff, a liaison to our playing rules oversight, and then also somebody from their coaches association. And so during those approximate 4 video conferences, they would talk about rules, issues that are occurring within their sport. They would also be able to get a preview of what legislation is going to be before the membership. And then from there, the idea is that a report would be written by the championship staff manager. It would go to that coach representative who would then send it out to all of the coaches within their conference. But the report would also go to the commissioner of that conference with the ask that the commissioner then share it back out with athletic directors and senior women administrators. So it's trying to really improve that communication and that transparency. Once we receive the feedback from commissioners and the NADIA executive group, which will occur in the next week or so, we will send it back to the championships committee. If they feel it's in a good place, they will make a formal recommendation to the management council to review and act on during their April meeting, with the idea that if it's a go, we will start next year, 2025, 2026, but we're only going to pick 3 sports, 1 per season, because we want to make sure we get this off the ground appropriately. We'll do a review in the summer of 2026. If all looks good and it's functioning the way we want it to function, we will look to add additional sports in 26, 27, and then keep adding sports till we get to the point where all of our championships are represented with a Coaches Connect program. Katie, we'll go to the next slide. So if you attended convention, you heard that Management Council and President's Council approved a partnership with Mental Health First Aid. And what this partnership would be is that we believe we'll have it signed by March 1st, and it will run all the way through August 1st of 2027. So over a couple of years. And Mental Health First Aid will come to every campus to provide an in-person training. And so we anticipate right around March 1st, I believe March 1st is on a Saturday, so we'll probably release the information on March 3rd or March 4th, but we will set up and let institutions know, how do I set up this training on my campus? It's for head coaches and athletic trainers. Once those members go through the training, it provides them a certification that is good for 3 years. After that 3 years, if you want to say this was really valuable in terms of helping our head coaches and our athletic trainers be able to identify, understand, and respond to mental health challenges, you can do a recertification, and it's $29 per person. So what we believe is a very affordable rate. So this was, again, I think if you talk to any student athlete, any coach, this is one of the biggest issues on campuses. And what we're hopeful is that Division III, by front loading the expenses, will be able to give you the opportunity to give this training to your head coaches, to your athletic trainers, sort of set that foundation. And then in 3 years, when the recertifications are due, either you've maybe had the opportunity to save money for those recertifications, or you could look to your conference to say, is there funding there to help me offset that? So that this is something similar to your AED or your first aid or your CPR training, something that is now part of the toolkit for your coaches and your athletic trainers to be able to assist your student athletes.
Well, Lise, before we move on, we have a question
Sure.
about this. The question is, would administrators be allowed to access the mental health first aid training at some point, and are assistant coaches included in this opportunity?
Yep. So the way it will be set up, it was set up for head coaches and athletic trainers, understanding that a class size of 30 would cover that for most of our institutions. At the end of the day, institutions could say, okay, I only have 15 head coaches, 2 athletic trainers, so I am going to fill the rest of my spots with administrators or others on campus. That will ultimately be up to each institution to figure out how they fill those spots. But initially it was set up to make sure that head coaches and athletic trainers had that opportunity. Anything else with that, Katie?
That was the only one so far.
Okay. So I just want to give a quick update. President's Council last year, again, we had 2 outside reviews. One was by Deloitte and one was by Lewis Rice. The Deloitte review looked at our finances at a high level. Lewis Rice looked at all of our enrichment programs, grants, and initiatives. When those 2 reviews completed, there were several recommendations and opportunities for the division to consider moving forward. President's Council owned those recommendations and opportunities, and what they determined is one of the best ways to work through that was to create a subcommittee. So they created a future subcommittee. They had their first meeting in December with the idea that they would be sort of the front line to look at those recommendations and opportunities and provide recommendations to the full President's Council. But also understanding that so much is occurring within higher education and college athletics, the future subcommittee will also keep their fingers on what is happening there and continue to advise President's Council to say, this may be an area that we want to look more at as we're serving our membership. The future subcommittee will meet quarterly. They'll always meet prior to the President's Council quarterly meetings. So as President's Council is asking them to do specific work, it will time up with their meetings. They will also work very closely with our Strategic Planning and Finance Committee and our Management Council. So as you hear or read updates about the future subcommittee, we just wanted to make sure that you understood why it was created and what its role will be moving forward. So Bill had an opportunity to work with individuals from the membership on our athletic training resource that was given out at convention. It was also mailed to all of you. Katie Mucci, who was on the Division III team, has created another working group, but instead of working and looking at athletic trainers, it's looking at athletic communication and sports information directors. We currently have a guide to athletics communication. It's right on ncaa.org. It was first created in 2013 in terms of how can athletic departments elevate and engage your sports information and athletic communication directors. We updated it in 2019. This is a profession that is changing rapidly. I can't even say from year to year. Sometimes I think it's from month to month. And so we are looking, especially because we've heard from the membership that not only has there been a strain on athletic trainers, there has been a tremendous strain on athletic communication and sports information directors. So we are looking, Katie, along with members of the division, have this working group, are looking to update this resource again. They are partnering with College Sports Communicators, formerly COSIDA, who is sending out this month a membership survey to get data that we can use to update that resource. We anticipate everything staying on schedule, which means that that new resource will be released to the membership this summer. And then also recently, our LGBTQ One Team program was created back in 2019. And again, this is another area that has been changing rapidly. And so what we did this past fall is we updated our logo, and we also updated the program, and that included bringing in a new cohort of facilitators. So to date, we have just under 50 facilitators who are like our Inclusive Leaders program. They're willing to come to your campus, to your conference, no charge, to be able to really provide sort of foundational information about how do you have an inclusive environment on your athletic teams. The training could be for administrators and coaches and staff, but there's also the same training can be used for student athletes. If you wanted to have the captains of your teams or your campus SAC or your conference SAC go through the training, it's a great opportunity, again, especially in a space where there has been lots of change, lots of misinformation, really to provide foundational information in a non-threatening way that will encourage inclusion on your teams. And that's something that if you go to the Division III diversity page, you can read about that training, you can see who the facilitators are, and hopefully, just like our Inclusive Leaders program, you'll find the time to be able to bring that training to your campus or to your conference. So the past, I had to count this up. I actually think it's been about the last 9 months. So the last 3 council meetings, as well as National SAC, Management Council, President's Council, has really been looking at this topic of sports betting. And they have been receiving feedback from the Sports Science Institute, who had a summit this past fall. And really out of that, it came to say, prohibitive measures. So our current legislation that there's consequences if you're betting don't necessarily curb betting behaviors. We also have had recent surveys of student athletes, but also compliance that show that most students on campuses, I believe it's over 60%, are betting in some format. And so really the councils and SAC have been discussing, obviously there's integrity issues to the game if there's betting on college sports. But it's the space around, well, what about betting on professional sports? Does that relate to the integrity of the college game? Does it hinder those who have an addiction to gambling going to seek help to say, can I have some guidance and counseling in a space? Because right now they're fearful to say that they have an addiction because that's admitting that they're gambling, which is a violation currently. And so no action has been taken, but really the councils and SAC have said, does that sort of prohibition of betting on professional sports, does it still make sense today as we're serving our student athletes? And what we have heard consistently from the councils, from our student athletes on National SAC, as well as the Sports Science Institute, is that the most important thing is to be able to provide educational resources that would help all of you implement harm reduction strategies. The good news is our new chief medical officer doesn't want to come up with a whole set of new things you have to do, but instead, our mental health resources align really well to helping those with gambling addictions. If you have an addiction to gambling, your anxiety is higher, your depression rates are higher. And that's what our mental health resources already address. And so our Sports Science Institute is working on a resource to say, it's not something new. You have the mental health resources. Let us connect sort of those dots of how you help those who have an addiction to gambling. So stay tuned in this space. No action, but the Council's National SAC will continue to look at that as they come into their April and summer meetings. I think that's it. I am 1 minute past. I only see one person who's guessing on how many emails, but Katie, I'm happy to answer any questions. And then I will open my email and let everybody know how popular I feel right now, thanks to a bad email.
We just have one question in here so far, back to mental health first aid. If a school or institution has more than 30 head coaches and athletic trainers combined, can the class size be bigger than 30?
Yep. So they'll be prompted to reach out to me, and we know that some of our institutions sponsor more than 30 varsity programs. We have set up a way that we can create space for those additional head coaches and athletic trainers.
Perfect. And I'm seeing some more guesses, but still no other questions, Louise.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up. Bill did say that this recording will be on our Division III webinar page. We thank you for participating. And Katie, I have no idea. I am at 323 emails right now.
No one got it spot on.
Okay. Well, if you feel kind, let your folks know they do not need to complete the committee training video. And we apologize again for you receiving the email in error. We wish you all the best as you go into your winter championships. The spring semester goes by in a blink, but hopefully you'll be back for next month's Division III webinar. And thanks so much.